And Alexander Rossi, just one of several McLaren drivers here this weekend, and we're about to get another display of their Formula One. There's Marshall Pruitt up and down for Racer Magazine, doesn't miss a trick. He's going to be looking for an interview or two, because we turn our attention now to this Formula One display. Like I mentioned that the James Hunt car was out earlier, and Alex drove it yesterday. Not here today, he's at a wedding today. So we now have, well, we've got a group of cars. We've got Pato O'Ward, we've got Rob Garofal, Stefan Johansson, and if you don't know that name, you should, because a great Indy and Formula One driver, but still involved with Ganassi Racing. And this afternoon, we've got Stefan, Rob, and Pato O'Ward, but also our first appearance of the man himself, Lando Norris. And I say the man himself because at the moment in Formula One, I think if Bruce were looking down right now, he'd be pretty happy to see another guy making his way in Formula One as a youngster, but also turning the tide. Funnily enough, I was with Lando as a 15-year-old in New Zealand when he first won his first major international title of the Toyota Racing Series, and of course that brought a great deal of glee to his career and marched him forward towards Formula One. But now to be with McLaren and sort of look back at what he achieved back then, I'm sure still as a youngster, and like Bruce, he's a kind of guy, he's a modern tinkerer, and what I mean by that is he loves all aspects of the sport. When during the pandemic, Lando Norris was on Twitch, he was on the Sims, he was getting the audience going, he was having fun with the crowd and that was watching and tuning in, and so I think he fits nicely into the history of McLaren even at 24. Scott, you're still with me, and I'm delighted you're here because this is totally different, but actually, another fantastic piece of history as we watch a Prost Senna car take to the track as well.
Right. Well, the MP4 cars, of course, they signal the beginning of the Ron Dennis era.
Yeah.
And people don't realize what that stands for. When Ron Dennis in the 70s was running a Formula 2 team sponsored by Motul, that was called Project 4. So when he then moved into the lead of McLaren, that was McLaren Project 4, and that's when he was with Neil Trundle, and they had a very competitive F2 team. Now, the early MP4s, of course, were tagged Porsche powered, so it was a V6 1.5 liter twin turbo. Techniques Avant-Garde, the company from Mansur Orge, and they, again, were game changers in Formula One. They were utterly dominant, having the power of an OEM behind him, Porsche, building engines that were specific for their chassis. And that was one of the advantages McLaren had early on in Formula One of that era.
Now, Pato O'Ward, who is at the wheel of this car as we speak, has had a pretty fun relationship with his boss, as did Daniel Ricciardo, I may add. Daniel Ricciardo got to drive, I think, a Richard Petty car that Zach owns, but now and previously he has driven both Zach's current Formula One cars, and now he's driving a championship-winning McLaren as driven by Lewis Hamilton in 2008. And while I'm not a big fan of the shape of this particular McLaren, it does fit into the history of it. And of course, this was the controversial year that Lewis had to finish in fifth place. And were it not for a last lap change with Massa taking the victory, Massa would have won the world championship, and Lewis Hamilton wouldn't, and it changed very quickly in a matter of seconds, and it was a lot of confusion. And would you believe it? It's 2023, and they're still debating it today.
Yeah, well, it was the whole notion of team orders and everything, and people like to believe that they're athletes, they're champions, whatever, that it's a fair fight and that everyone's trying to do the best they can for themselves. But Formula One racing is a team effort. There's 1,000 people behind this car. And McLaren wants a championship. They're not worried about a particular driver's standing or ego. They want the team to win the championship.
I hope somebody's got a watch on this, because I know Pato well enough to know that he is not going to hold back. He is obviously an IndyCar driver. He's raced Sonoma in an IndyCar many a time. He's been here to do these exhibitions as well. He's done Laguna. Look at him taking a little bit of dust and dirt. He is going for it.
Yeah, he is putting the hammer down when you're using going over the berms on the exit of turn 3A. That's pretty good. And he's certainly carrying a lot of speed into the carousel. Just look how the car is loaded up, and look how he's running out. I mean, he's really running the car well. I don't know what kind of times he's turning. We don't have access to that, but I'm sure he's not standing around.
No, he certainly is not standing around, and just watching him come through the top of the circuit now, just going through the gearbox, now through the S's and down towards that hairpin again, but he is absolutely on it. Mercedes powered, of course. And this was designed by Neil Otley as the executive engineer at the time. Paddy Lowe still involved in Formula One, of course.
Yeah, and it was one of the earliest cars to use that curved front compound wing. You know, when they first came out, everybody thought they were ugly and that they wouldn't work. And if you look at the cars back then, they were on a week-by-week basis evolving the wings and the winglets and the front ends.
It changed every week, didn't it?
Whereas earlier on, you know, the design was pretty much, you know, established at the beginning of the season, and they worked on refining it. Whereas, boy, by the time you got to 2008, there were wholesale changes made every week on these cars.
Yeah, and of course, at the time, we'll move on in a moment, but at the time, that other car was driven by Heikki Kovalainen. Successful year it was for McLaren, winning both the World Championship and second in the Constructors as well. And
yeah, you could hear the very different sound of the six-cylinder turbo tag cars versus the later 2008 car. You know, all these eras, the engines have their own growl.
But again, those colors synonymous with the Ron Dennis cars of that time, the Philip Morris sponsorship, of course.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Ron accomplished, I mean, when he got McLaren in the late 1970s versus the empire that it is now, you can say what you will about his management style and what he did or didn't do or what he was or wasn't good at, but wow, talk about evolving and growing a company. It's truly remarkable.
Yeah, so as I said, at the wheel of the MP4 6A-10, Rob Garofal, a accomplished test driver for McLaren and European Le Mans champion in his time. You've got Pato Award, Stefan Johansson's in the MP4 2B03, and Lando in that MP4 2A.
And talk about somebody who's driven a lot of race cars. Is there anything that Stefan Johansson hasn't driven? I mean, you know, he's won in the rain in a 956 in a Porsche at Spa. He's driven Formula One cars. I mean, he's driven just about everything.
Yeah. And you mentioned Ron. You know, not everybody knows that Ron started as a mechanic for McLaren.
Right. No, and that was the beginning of Project 4. It was Neil Trundle and Ron Dennis and Alan Rees and another gentleman I don't remember, but they formed Project 4, and that was near and dear to Ron's heart and always was, and that's why all the cars to this day are MP4/something.
The Prost-Senna battle, the drivers' battle, almost kind of negated the brilliance of the car itself. They won everything. There was one year where I think they won 15 out of 16 races between them, but their bitter rivalry was unbelievable. And, you know, with Prost saying, you know, I'll do another year, but not if he's in the team and this sort of stuff. And
well, but you talk about what...
He retired because of it.
You know, what drives an engineering team to put the best car they could on the track. Imagine if you're an engineer for Senna or you're a technician on the Senna team and I'm on the Prost team. Man, you know, they really made leaps and bounds because they knew they had a driver. They knew that if they did their best work and gave their driver the best car, they had a chance of winning.
Yeah, and also what distinguished the pair of them was that their styles were completely different. Prost, the Frenchman, the quiet Frenchman, the thinking man's driver, and his quotes were obvious. He believed that the slower you can drive a car and win, the better. And by the way, very good philosophy, because that means it holds together. Mechanically, you've got more chance of it not falling apart, whereas Senna rang the neck out of everything he drove, whether it was a hire car, a bicycle, or a racing car. And his emphasis was all on speed.
When you look at times when Senna had a truly awful car, like the very first active suspension Williams, the pure force of will.
Or the Ford-powered McLaren before that.
Yeah, the pure force of will, just hurling that thing around and still putting it on the pole, getting out of the car shaking.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying so hard that it's just unbelievable the force of nature that guy was. in driving a car, and it's a shame we lost him so soon.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't until '94 when he did have that Williams that just wasn't competitive that we saw it clearly. But when he came into Formula One in Tolman, for example, or Lotus,
which was nothing but an F2 car with a bigger engine, it was unbelievable. Yeah,
and he was doing, and that's where I think the racing world that were involved in Formula One at the time knew that they had something.
They had something there.
Well, they knew it in Formula 3 days at Macau when he won there back in '83, and everybody went, "Who the heck is this?" Even Gerhard Berger. I did an interview with Gerhard, and he was at the race in at Macau in '83. And he even said that day he realized that in the years to come, whatever happened in his career, he just wasn't. I mean, they were great friends. They became great friends. But he knew that Ayrton Senna was just top drawer and kind of out of this world.
And there's a lot of times we talk about the body language of the car when it's racing. And when you look at when Senna was driving a car, it was very clear that he was master and commander of what was happening. That if he came within an inch of the wall, that's because he wanted to come within an inch of the wall.
Yeah.
It was truly something to see. I was very fortunate to see him, in live when he was still alive.
Yeah, and if you wanted to pinpoint, the two sort of opposites as we look at Lando Norris in that MP4 2A, but if you want to put a point on it. We think of Japan, championships won and lost over 2 years with those two throwing each other into the gravel effectively, or kind of that's how it ended up. And then looking at Monaco, where both of them had unbelievable careers there. And again, different styles. Senna going home to his apartment for 3 days after losing while leading, but also winning 6 times.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening here? We've got the 08.
Yep. Oh, that's the latest car. That's the 23A.
Yeah. So that's Pato.
Award.
We've got Lando
Looks like
out
they're
there.
Extracting the driver.
I wonder with Pato how much he kind of, he's been in the middle of this maelstrom that involved Palou and all the rest of it. The potential of being a reserve driver for McLaren Formula One. He's loving his time. Oh, he's not happy by the looks of things. In his Mission Foods sponsorship, but or he's more than happy. I don't know whether he's just shaking his head. He's happy.
Yeah.
I know that look.
Yeah.
He's happy. Yeah, he's enjoying that. He said that was fantastic.
I mean, what's not to enjoy when you've got, first of all, when you've got his skill set, and then you can put it to use with that tool. That's about as good as it gets.
Well, and I just wonder, because I know Pato pretty good, and I was asking him about having runs, because he made a bet with Zach to run the Abu Dhabi tests. He said, if I win, I can't remember what it was, one of the Indy races for him, he said, I want to test your F1 car. He said, you're on. And he said, okay. And I think it was 21 that he got a chance to finally get a Formula One run.
Wow.
And that was a bet. And then, of course, it led to a serious, why don't you be our reserve driver? And then Palou came into the picture, as it were, and he was on those blocks. And now, then Ricciardo, there was a lot going on.
More drama than Peyton Place.
Oh, great. But you wonder, I would love to see, and here I am, maybe kind of getting a misty eye, but I'd love to see Lando and Pato as a team to reckon with in Formula One.
That would certainly be a formidable combination.
And I'd love to see Lando do an Alonso, which is come out and do the 500, just for, excuse my French, shits and grins, because he would.
And it's funny, Lando, I'm sure there was a choice involved. Lando's driving the oldest MP4 car out there now, the MP4 2A. There's actually an older McLaren here. Ranson Webster has an MP4/1 that's on exhibit.
Yeah, we've got the field is deep. It's not just McLaren bringing their Formula One cars. There is a lot of other, like you say, Ranson Webster and a few others in the actual group coverage.
I was very fortunate for a number of years. I owned M14 that was Bruce McLaren's last Formula One car. It's the car he drove at Monaco in May before he was killed at Goodwood in June.
How'd he go?
I'm sorry?
How did he go at Monaco?
I think he was 5th or 6th. Bruce was not the driver Denny was, and Bruce was very smart. He hired drivers who were better than him to run his cars in Formula One. But the car had an interesting history, and then was identified by the rivet patterns on the tub and pictures in Monaco with Bruce sitting in the car, that it was that car. And just a lot of history and a lot of fun.
How cool is it that we are able, in this sort of window of 2 weeks, to get Lando here? And I don't mean to over. I mean, you know, you're a racing driver, but this is a guy.
No, I'm a racing dabbler. He's a racing driver.
I know, but of a guy of this quality, we're outside of, you know, Verstappen right now. This guy is on top of his game. He's yet to win a Formula One race, but my word, when he does, and his teammate Piastri has already won. But it could happen in Vegas in 3 days' time. It really could.
Well, when you see an interview with him, he's having so much fun. Oh. I mean, he's just like, you know, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do, you know. And, you know, he's going to develop into a fabulous driver. He's got all the tools available, and he's clearly got the natural talent, and he's certainly got the determination. And from what I've seen, he's pretty fearless.